Morning, good evening, good afternoon. One of the problems we have in Zimbabwe is that we have got leaders who really do not have the humility to accept even when they've been proven to be wrong. That is at the heart of the failure to have a democratic system. Because when you've got somebody who thinks that they know best, you invariably have a tyrant, somebody with a tyrant mentality or dictator mentality that will not accept that they could be wrong. And once people like that get into power, they believe they are right so absolutely that they will not tolerate any meaningful debate. They stifle it. Everything else becomes a waste of time because I know the answers. We are trying to create a democratic system where the very essence of democracy is that everybody should have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. And you, as a leader, you've got to accept that you might be wrong. That is at the heart of it. The minute you start believing that you are right and absolutely right, it becomes a problem straight away. Here is a Twitter message that Nelson Chamisa sent recently. And in it, he is saying that the absolute truth, when all is said and done, all who are truthful and honest shall admit and acknowledge the repeated role of the state in the plot and engineered illegal MP recalls, political party finance, diversion, and criminal takeover of the alternative in 2020 and 2023. Further, history shall vindicate our principled stance and unshakable conviction in maintaining that purity and fidelity as an authentic alternative. Mark this Twitter. Nelson Chamisa is a mere mortal. Some people want or have elevated him to the point where they feel that like he is an infallible demigod. And unfortunately, that has also got into his head. He's beginning to believe that he's infallible. Absolute truth. Well, this so-called absolute truth that the state engineered, I'm not here to argue one way or the other about whether the state interfered in 2020 or 2023. But I also am shocked that he himself does not appreciate the role he himself played in this whole sad scenario. Let's focus on 2023. Many people told him that as a political party, CCC must have a constitution. that would clearly define the roles of the individuals in the party. It must have a structure. It must have uh, democratically elected members to fill in those positions. He himself is the one who stubbornly refused to do so. When Savangu started recalling the MPs last year, Chamisa challenged that decision in court. I don't think we could argue that even if he had gone to any other country with any health and functioning law, would have found it would have not struggled to understand what was going on. Savangu said he was the Secretary General of the party. And the court correctly asked Chamisa, as the person who was challenging that decision, to produce the evidence that he was not. As much as I'll be the first one to admit that our legal system in Zimbabwe is captured by the ruling party, ZANU-PF, I still can't see what else the court would have done. You ask for the evidence. Let's have your constitution. Let's see what constitution you have as a party. He produces a 4-page constitution. Has this been ratified by anybody? No. So you have a party that has no constitution, that has no structure. You yourself, you call yourself the president of the CCC because you nominated yourself. Well, Savangu used that loophole to nominate himself as Secretary General. What did you want the courts to do? The point here is, as much as ZANU-PF exploited that weakness, the fact of the matter is the weakness was there, and it was of CCC's own making. And for somebody as party leader to fail to acknowledge that and saying, okay, put up my hands up, we made a mistake here. We should have sorted this out. It beggars belief. No wonder his followers grasp this Twitter with both hands and they believe every word of it. This is at the heart of the problem with some of our electorate. They never question anything. They never look at anything in any critically. The 2020 scenario where Chamisa was ruled to be the way he had seized power after Tsvangirai's death was unconstitutional. One has got to only look at it objectively and you will say, yeah, there was some weakness in the process itself. And if Chamisa and company had acknowledged that failing in 2020, hopefully they would not have repeated the same thing in 2023. They did not. So the thing was carried through. And we are seeing the history repeating itself. Failure to acknowledge that Chamisa played a key role in this 2020 takeover of the party from Chamisa to initially Mrs. Coupe, and then taken over by Montora as MDC Alliance, and then the takeover of Triple C, forcing him to resign. Those are events that yet could have been avoided, particularly the latter one, because it was almost a repeat of the previous event. But the failure to acknowledge that, yes, this was a mistake, this was a weakness, we should have got this one right, allowed them to carry through 23 as well. There is an English writer, Alexander Pope. What he said in one of his poems is a little learning is a dangerous thing. Deep drink or taste not the Pierian Spring. Their shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking largely sobers us up. The Pierian Spring is, in Greek mythology, the spring of wisdom. What Alexander Pope was saying there is, if you take a sip from the spring of knowledge, you can easily get intoxicated, drunk. But those who drink large, they will grasp the bigger ideas. And when you begin to realize how much knowledge there is there, it humbles you. You begin to realize that drinking one small cup is nothing compared to the rest of the knowledge. You cannot claim that you know it all because you've only drunk one cup. There is so much for you to learn. This is a spring of knowledge. You cannot pretend that you have understood the knowledge when you've only taken one cup. You've got to drink so much of it. And even then, you still realize that there is still a lot you do not know, that you do not understand. That is the drinking deep will sober you up. What we tend to have with our leaders in Africa is individuals who take a sip from the pool of knowledge, and they start masquerading as Mr. Know-it-all. They do not have the humility to accept, even when they've done something outrageous. Nelson Chamisa last year was the one who convinced his followers and the nation at large that Triple C was going to win the election. Large, he said. Because he had many strategies of winning rigged elections. One of them was this Operation Green Mango, where he advised his followers that you can continue to wear these ZANU-PF green colors on the outside. And yet when it comes to the day of voting, you vote for yellow, triple C colors. Right up to the very last day of the election, he maintained that triple C was going to win because he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes for ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF was going to try to rig the elections, but he plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. The truth of the matter is, as he himself readily acknowledged just a day after the voting was done, that ZANU-PF did rig the elections. He didn't have the common sense to come back to the people and apologize that he had made a mistake. Again, we see this history repeating itself. In 2018, he made the same mistake. He was the one who was insisting that MDC Alliance should participate in those elections because the party has come up with stringent measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. Of course, he was lying. ZANU-PF went on to rig those elections. What happened to the stringent measures? He never came back to admit that he had lied. This is a problem because, unfortunately, particularly when you've got an electorate who are ignorant and gullible, who believe everything they're told by the leader. I think if the Zimbabwe electorate had been more switched on, they would have asked him after the 2018, what happened to the stringent measures? You said you had stringent measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. They never asked. And so in 2023, history repeated itself. This time he was coming up with the Operation Green Mangoes and this issue of I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. He even evoked the name of God. God is in it, he said. We all know that he was lying. And when this takeover of the party happened soon after the elections, he is adamant that it was the work of the party, of the ruling party. Yes, but how are you also acknowledging that you played your role in making it easy for ZANU-PF to infiltrate a triple C by having no constitution, no elected officials, nothing? You made it easy for them. Unless we begin to acknowledge problems like that, we'll always be repeating them over and over again. I think the biggest problem we have is that we've got an electorate that is so naive, ignorant, and gullible. They want to believe everything that the leader says. And when you're talking of a leader like Nelson Chamisa, and they've got such a captive audience, captive followers, who believe everything he says, he becomes too big-headed. He starts saying things that are not true and want to pretend they are true. And those around him want to pretend that they are true. The reality is a country cannot make any sound decisions as long as we avoid making those tough decisions, just because we are easily conned into believing the cheap decisions. Nelson Chamisa and company will never, ever win rigged elections in Zimbabwe. So the best option for us is to make sure that the elections are not rigged. If Nelson Chamisa and company cannot implement reforms, let's find somebody else who can implement the reforms. To keep on claiming that we can somehow manage is ridiculous. That is what has got us into this mess. And for somebody like Chamisa, with his track record of being corrupt and incompetent and utterly useless, to start talking of claiming that he's talking of truth. Since when was Chamisa capable of capturing the absolute truth? He's not. Change is easy. We can easily attain change, but we need to work for it. We need to understand what is it that will bring meaningful change. And some of these outrageous statements, making outrageous claims that, here is somebody who has got unshakable principles, men of principles, when he failed to implement even one democratic reform, which was the number one task that the nation had set out for him. A man of conviction. It's laughable. We can't keep on making the same mistakes over and over again. Nelson Chamisa and these Triple C friends have proven that they are corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless. And the sooner the people of Zimbabwe wake up to that reality, the better. Because then they can start the difficult task of looking for competent opposition leaders. Zimbabwe cannot afford this carry on that has been taking place here. That is a fact. Thank you very much for listening, and good night.